So what I'd like to do in today's session is I'm going to start taking you through the fundamentals of using the inventory module in SAP Business One. Now, because the inventory module in Business One is quite comprehensive, what I thought I'd do is I'd break this down into a couple of different sessions. So in today's session, we're going to focus on the very basics of SAP Business One. Now, I know this series is called 15-minute fundamentals, so you're probably thinking, well, hang on, isn't everything fundamentals? So, couldn't you fit it all into one session? And unfortunately, the answer to that one is no. Many of you will have purchased SAP Business One because you're in a wholesale distribution style business where inventory is important. So no doubt many of you will be aware of how complete the inventory management functionality is in the core SAP Business One solution. So this won't come as a surprise for you. But as I said, this session will focus on the basics, and then in other sessions we'll drill down into some more of the details of the inventory module. So let's dive in, and again, I'm running this session utilizing standard SAP Business One version 9.3. We're back on SQL Server for this session. You may have remembered, if you've looked at some of the other sessions, we did those utilizing SAP Business One version for HANA, so the cockpit looked a little bit different. So we're now back looking at the standard version that many of you will be operating with if you're running on Microsoft SQL Server. So let's dive into inventory, and a couple of things that you need to be aware of is that when you're looking at inventory, you can start off from an item master data perspective, but then sitting underneath when you create your inventory items, there's a lot more information that's available for you. And that's why in the menu, you'll see we have some of this basic information here in these options, the item master data, setting up your barcodes and document printing. But then getting into the more detailed areas of functionality like bin location, like item management, managing the transactions, these are all held in these additional submenus. Even things like working with the price lists and the pick and pack manager in the inventory module, they are in their own separate menus. Why? Well, for example, when I go into item management, you'll see this is exposing out some of that more detailed functionality for me, like the ability to manage my serial numbers, the ability to manage batches, alternative items, business partner catalog numbers, and so on and so forth. All right, now you may never need to utilize some of these functions. So the thing to bear in mind is that just because you're seeing it here in my system and you might see these options in your system doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use them or that they're going to add a layer of complexity to your Business One system. All right, but it's nice to know that capability is there. And there's a lot of different ways that you can use some of this functionality like serial numbers and batch tracking and so on and so forth. Even if you're not managing products that, for example, have expiry dates or you're not managing pieces of equipment that have to have serial numbers. Classic example, a lot of organizations might be selling products like software, for example, where you need to track serial numbers. I've seen organizations that sell prepaid SIM cards for mobile phones using SAP Business One, and they use that serial number management functionality to help them manage all those SIM cards. And we're talking about the capability to handle thousands and thousands of serial numbers inside the system. So it's fairly comprehensive functionality. But let's dive into our item master data and let's take a look at the basic information that's in SAP Business One. Now, you're going to hear me say a few of these things over and over again, and that's because repetition is the master of understanding, and it's important to remember some of these things till it becomes second nature. And here we go. Item master data. When you open up any master data screens in SAP Business One, remember, it automatically assumes you're going to be doing a lookup. And that's one of the reasons why this screen opens up and it's got these yellow options, because these are the fields that you can click on, and you can go and do a search based on the information that's in those fields. And you'll see I've got my find option here. But of course, I can toggle between find and add mode just simply by using my control key. So I can go Control A, and that now takes me into add mode. So it assumes that I'm now going to go and create a new item. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up an existing item just for the sake of the exercise, and we'll take a look at some of these different fields that you're working with. So if you have the responsibility for creating your inventory, I'm going to focus on some of the things that you need to be aware of just to get started and do and handle the basics. So when you're creating your item master data, you can have your stock keeping units or SKUs, product codes, call them what you will, and you can have those so that they are manually created, or you're able to go in and, as you are with a lot of the master data, you can set up an automatic numbering sequence so that Business One will automatically create a code for you for your inventory items. Now, most organizations that I'm aware of do have a tendency with things like inventory to want to create their own item numbers. But again, it's nice to know you've got that functionality there. Now, a lot of these fields are fairly self-explanatory, so I'm not going to labor the point. For example, description, well, that's kind of obvious what that is. That's your product description. But some of these other fields are not as obvious, so we're going to spend a bit of time focusing on those. First of those fields are across here, are these items where you specify, is the product an inventory item? Is it a sales item, and is it a purchase item? So what's the difference between these? Well, if it's an inventory item, that's where you're basically saying that you are managing the stock. All right, so you are wanting to keep a track of the quantities that you have available. So you can create what are called non-stock items in SAP Business One. And the easiest way to create a non-stock item is to untick the inventory item option. Now, of course, you'll see that if you ever try and change some of these things and it's going to violate the system rules, you'll get your message down here in the status bar, right? So, again, trying to untick that inventory item is basically saying, well, look, this item is actually used as a component in a bill of materials, so you can't make a change there. Let's take the sales item. If a product is a sales item, that fundamentally means that it is available for you to use in the sales process. You can untick this, all right? And again, what that will do is that will remove this item from sale, okay? So you might be in a situation where you may temporarily want to, to do that with a particular product. You might want to take it off sale, and so on and so forth. So it's nice to know, again, you've got that capability there. And then, of course, you've got this option to flag it as whether or not it is an item that is purchased. So if you create purchase orders and so on and so forth. So you've got that combination of all of these three different flags that you can set against an inventory item. So let's continue on down the screen and let's look at some of these other things. So you'll see you've got the ability to go and create your item types. And you know what? I'm going to move to another product just so we can drill down on some of these fields. So now I'm selecting the JB Office Print 1111, and you'll see now that if I go in and I try and change any of these fields, because this particular product is not a component in the bill of materials, it's allowing me to do that. So if I look here at my item type, I've got my items here, so I can say, well, look, this is items, labor, or travel. So these are standard fields that are set up inside SAP Business One. Then you have your item groups. So a good rule of thumb is whenever you see this option on any one of these drop-down lists of define new, that's immediately telling you that, well, you can add your own values into this field. So this is your item group, and this is really handy if you want to start grouping your items together for the purposes of reporting or maintenance or so on and so forth. And then, of course, you have your unit of measure group. So now SAP Business One supports multiple units of measure. So that basically means you can have a product and you might buy it in cartons of 12, but then you might sell it in eaches. All right, so the units of measure make things very, very easy for you to handle that. And also you can start getting into some complex scenarios where you're doing unit of measure conversions. But again, that's a more detailed topic. We're not going to cover that in this session. But remember, with OneSource, you have the Q&A area on the community page. So again, if you want me to get in and answer some questions, or you've got questions about one of these particular areas that's not covered in a video, don't forget you can get on there and you can place your questions there, and I'll be more than happy to go ahead and answer them for you. All right, so again, that's what that's for. They're your unit of measure group. And then, of course, you've got your barcode. And with the barcode, this gives you the ability to then, you can add the barcode field to data entry screens in SAP Business One, for example, and start using your barcode reader to pull that information in. Now, important point to note with barcodes. Remember that a barcode device is fundamentally, it's basically a keyboard interface. It is replacing the necessity, easy for me to say, it's replacing the necessity of typing in a code. All right, so you point the gun, click it, and it's the equivalent of typing in a code. So when you're thinking about barcoding is very easy to implement in SAP Business One, but when you start thinking about radio frequency barcoding, where you're starting to have mobile guns running around a warehouse or whatever the case may be, that's not so easy. All right, so there is different degrees of difficulty with the way that you use some of these features in SAP Business One. But for example, if I'm here looking at the barcode, you'll see that I have this ellipsis and these 3 dots. That's an ellipsis. What this allows you to do is when you're creating these fields, you can click on here, and you're able to go ahead and you're able to specify, the barcodes for this particular product. All right. So you can have multiple barcodes that relate to this particular product. So I'm just going to say cancel just for now. Then you're getting down here into your general details about a product. So here on your general tab, you've got the ability to specify if a product is liable for tax or not. You can then go and specify who is the manufacturer. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to relate back to a vendor business partner record. All right, because these might be the manufacturers and you might not necessarily maintain accounts with them. But once again, a lot of these fields are very, very helpful when you want to start doing a lot of reporting. Your additional identifier. What is the additional identifier? Now here on this additional identifier in the Business One sample data that I've got, it's actually got some information here and you can put in translations. All right, so don't forget with SAP Business One, you have this capability to put in translation. So you, in various fields inside the system, you've got the capability to record that multiple language information. Again, your shipping types, these are user defined. And then you can specify whether or not you want to manage an item by batch and serial numbers. Now, once again, you're going to see that SAP Business One is making sure that you don't take any steps that might be potentially fatal, for want of a better word, from your implementation perspective. So, for example, if I wanted to switch on serial and batch numbers now, it's basically saying, hey, you can only change this when the available quantity is 0. Right, so right now, if I was to look at my inventory data by clicking across here, what you'll see is I've got lots and lots of stock. I've got sales orders that are in the system and so on. So I wouldn't want to go and start switching on batch and serial numbers right in the middle of this, because it'll throw the entire process into chaos. Right, so when you're implementing things like serial and batch numbering, you need to be aware that the product has to be in a certain state. So the best time to implement serial and batch numbers is at the start of your deployment. But of course, things change. You just need to be aware that there are those restrictions. Now, you can also, remember I talked about whether or not you wanted to be able to flag a product as being sellable, or if it was available to be purchased, and so on and so forth. you can go and you can specify a product as being active or inactive, and then you can specify that this product is either active or inactive from this range of dates. So you can say, look, this product might be something that you're only selling between this date and this date, so you put those dates in here, and then if you try and sell the product outside those dates or do anything with the product outside those dates, it's going to tell you that the product's inactive and you can't do that. All right. So again, you've got this this capability, and Business One continues to get more and more functionality over time. So it's important to keep an eye on the ASUG One Source portal, because as there's new functionality that becomes available in the software, we're going to try and make sure that we keep you up to date with that and explain how you can use a lot of that new functionality. So, for example, you can go in here and you can specify that you've got this advanced option where you can specify, well, it's active from this date to this date, but then it's inactive from this date to this date. Now, these advanced settings can then have rules that you set against them. All right, so you can set the rule to apply generally, or you can go in here and you can say my advanced rule type is by warehouse, or it's by item group. All right, and when you do that, when you start putting this information in, it's then going to ask you for additional information about either the warehouse or the item group and so on and so forth. But we're just going to leave that as active for now. All right, now again, remember, anytime you go and make any changes in this record, it's going to come in here and it's going to automatically change this option to say that this now needs an update. All right, so the system's detected that some change somewhere in the system has been made. So again, that's why this update option is there. Now, it's always a good idea, as soon as you've done enough that you wouldn't want to have to rekey it potentially if something went wrong, just hit that update button. So again, I can click update and you'll see that operation is now completed successfully. So now I'm back here and I've got my OK button. So let's look at some more of these options for you. Remember, we talked about the way that we handle purchasing with SAP Business One, and that you can specify whether or not a product is available for purchase order or not. That was back here on our general tab if it's a purchased item. So if I go here and it's a purchased item, then I can come in and I can specify who is my preferred vendor. Because remember, with SAP Business One, you can go ahead and you can create purchase orders. You can do MRP, materials requirements planning, where you can look at all of your stock. You can look at the orders that are in the system, sales orders, that is, the available stock, and then if you need more, you can automatically create purchase orders. Well, that's where the preferred vendor is helpful, because by default, when you go to create those purchase orders through MRP, the preferred vendor code is going to be applicable. But again, you've got your ellipsis here, so you can see you can have multiple preferred vendors available, but of course one of them will be set as the default. Now, I've only got one in here at the moment, so by default it is the default. You can always identify the default because it will be in bold. Alright, so if I was going to create multiple preferred vendors, then I could put them in here, and then again, as I said, I flag one as default and it will come up in bold. So you can also specify the manufacturer's catalog number. So, you might want to, when you're printing out your purchase orders, rather than showing your stock code, you want the manufacturer's catalog number. Now, the good thing about SAP Business One, remember I was talking over here about business partner catalog numbers? You can create a different code for every different manufacturer. So you might be in an industry where you call the product, in this case, an A0002, but different manufacturers have different product codes that they use, or different distributors have different product codes that you use or that they use. And then when you're creating the purchase order, you want to show their code on there. So Business One gives you the ability to do that. And also from a sales perspective, you can do the same thing for customers, but we'll talk about that in a second. So then you've got your purchasing unit of measure. So, you might find that you're only allowed to buy these in a carton or a pallet, and a pallet may contain 12. So if that was the case, you would set your purchasing unit of measure to pallet, and you would flag that the number of items per purchase unit is 12. So then remember that when you're purchasing and you're raising a purchase order, when you create a purchase order for 1 unit, that's 1 pallet in this scenario, okay, for example, or 1 carton, and that actually contains 12 eaches. Because remember, the each is that basic unit of measure that you have for every product that's inside the system. Then you can specify your packaging unit of measure and your quantity per package. So again, you can get quite flexible with managing how all of this data is tracked in the system. And this all starts to kick in when you start doing your pick and pack and you're doing your shipping. If the information's not stored inside the system, you can't do calculations. So SAP Business One gives you the ability to store all this information. Again, things like the length, width, height, volume, and weight. Again, very, very helpful when you're calculating your packing and your shipping. All right. Now, what you could do when you've created all this information, you can go here and you can click it on this button and you can copy that information to sales data. But we're going to go in here and we're going to look at the sales data specifically. So I can go in here and I can say, you know what? My sales unit of measure name is each. All right, and I've got 1 per sales unit of measure. And my packaging unit of measure name, again, same scenario, each, and I've got 1 per package. Okay, so you've got that kind of flexibility there. Again, I made a change, so I'm going to click on my update button, and that now has been committed successfully. Then when I come in here and I look at my inventory data, and this is where it's starting to get a little bit more detailed, and you're starting to think about the business rules you've got set up inside your organization. For example, setting your inventory valuation method. Right now, we've actually set our inventory valuation method by warehouse. But I can go in here and I can say, look, this is being done at the item level. All right, and what it will then do is it will ask me to start creating additional information at the item level. So if I go in here and I say update, that's now done. I can now go and start looking at that additional information. We'll see that shortly. But you've got that capability there to set that by warehouse, item group, or item level. I'm just going to change it back to warehouse. And you'll see what's basically happening here is that when I choose to set it back by warehouse, it is then going to go and overwrite a whole bunch of information. And we'll talk about that shortly, because when we're talking about the inventory methods, this impacts on how the general ledger accounts are selected. Okay, so I'm just going to say cancel there, and I'll just leave that back as it was. Now, again, for my inventory data, I can say, you know what, my stocking unit is an each. Okay, and then that weight of each one of these, this might be, say, 7 pounds for the sake of the exercise. Now I'm saying pounds because this is a US-based database. Okay, of course, if I was operating in metric, then it would be kilos and grams. Okay, so I'm just going to make that 7 pounds. So we'll change that. There we go. So it's now 7 pounds. And so again, you've got that additional information. Now, by the way, down here, you're now able to actually see all the warehouses where this item is stored. All right, so if you've got multiple warehouses, once you've created your item, you then have to specify which warehouses the item is stored in or sold from, and then you can also specify a default warehouse. So right now, you'll see there isn't a default warehouse, but if I go here and I select this warehouse, I select the line. So just by clicking on the row number here and I say select default warehouse, you'll now see that that's come up in bold. And that's what will happen every time you select something as a default. Again, I'm going to say update, and those changes are saved. Then you can start looking at your planning data. So now this is relevant when you're starting to look at things like how do you manage your purchasing, or are you manufacturing a product? So our planning method right now for this product, we're saying we're going to use MRP, Materials Requirements Planning. So in that particular scenario, we're going to be able to do forecasts, and we're going to be able to do an MRP, run our MRP wizard, which is going to go and look at what product I've got in stock, what orders I've got, and then tell me what I need to either buy or make to fulfill my stock. Right, and we'll talk about that more when we get into the MRP functionality, when we start looking at the manufacturing capabilities of SAP Business One. But even if all you do is you just buy your product, you can still use MRP. And as a matter of fact, I'd recommend that you do. And then this is your procurement method. Do I buy these products or do I make them? Now that's going to determine, when I do my MRP run, whether or not it tries to create purchase orders or production orders for this particular product. All right. Then you can go in here and you can start getting, a little bit more sophisticated, like specifying order intervals. So I want to, order this product every week or every month or whatever the case may be. You can then specify order multiples. So you've always got to order at least a multiple of X. Same scenario here, you can specify a minimum order quantity, like an economical order quantity. And the good thing about Business One is it can start tracking this information based on your vendor as well. You can specify what's the average lead time. All of this comes in because you'll see it's relating to our planning data. So when you're doing your planning, your inventory forecasting, all of these values become important in the calculations that the planning process is going to use. All right, so I've got my planning data, and then of course, if this is a product that I manufacture, then I'm going to have my production data. Now, I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritties of production. We'll cover that separately. But those of you who are familiar with production capabilities, you'll recognize some of these concepts, like the concept of a phantom item, the concept of whether or not you backflush or you manually issue product to a production order. So that's what all these fields here are for. You can also specify a production standard cost, and you can then include this in the production standard cost roll-up. So, you can say, here are all my inventory items that form part of my bill of materials, but this one, I don't want to include the standard cost in the finished cost of the item in the standard cost. All right, so again, giving you that flexibility. As you saw, if you looked at the business partner session that I did, we've also got all of these user-defined properties. So again, you can utilize these user-defined properties for recording things like, is it a hazardous product, or basically anything. But remember, this is a one-to-one relationship. You create these item properties. You can only flag it as true or false. All right, if you want to be able to set a value and then be able to pick from a pick list, then you're going to probably need to utilize user-defined fields. All right, and then add that as a user-defined field and make that user-defined field pickable or selectable from a pick list. Okay. Your remarks, again, this is where you can put additional text about the product, and you can also attach a photo. Now, this is very, very useful if you're starting to do e-commerce site integration, because the information that you store in here, you'll then want to potentially have that automatically flowing across to your e-commerce solution. And again, don't forget, wherever you see this little icon, that means there are translations available underneath that. So you can have all kinds of different language translations. Okay, and you can see you pick your language translation and you put in your translation value. Again, part of that is because SAP is Unicode compliant. So that basically, SAP Business One rather, is Unicode compliant. So that means that you can store all of that information in the standard database. And then last but not least, you have your attachments. And this is where you can attach other documents. So material safety data sheets, product brochures, different product images, all of those different kinds of things you can store in here inside your item master data, or data, depending on how you like to say it. So that's it. That's a quick look at those fundamental fields inside the SAP Business One master data record. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Creating that master data is the very first step. Then once you've done that, you've got additional information that you can record underneath that. But for now, we're going to leave it at that. When we come back in our next session, I'm going to take you through some of these more advanced areas around serial numbers and batch number tracking, how some of these alternative items work, and then we're going to take a look at things like your inventory transactions and things like your price lists and pick and pack.